discuss this issue. And Srdjan Majstorovic will be moderating this discussion, our colleague from Belgrade. So thank you so much, Srdjan. With Ante Dobrushi from Open Society Foundation's Western Balkans, Anja Quiring, and Stepan Ristevski. So, but I just wanted to note, thank you to our two volunteers, Anissa and Vlera, who've been managing the mics and doing all the help. Thank you. And to our social media team, Tamara and Hana and Milica. Thank you. Srdjan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dani, and thanks goes to the organizers, obviously, for being stubborn and brave and pushing for this very important conference to become a tradition. I was privileged to participate at the first conference, and I remember Agon saying that was a kind of maybe somehow a strong a title for a conference to be a regional summit, but he called it aspirational. And year by year, the aspiration is growing, and obviously I hope that at a certain stage these summits will really become a serious, I mean, they're already serious, obviously, but a place where even political leaders will gather and share their vision of the future. And this is very closely connected to the topic that we are going to discuss today, and this is a future of the Western Balkans, where we are going to analyze the growth plans potential. But before we start talking about future, I would, in the spirit of the previous female-led panel, I would like to start with a citation, and I would like to take you some 71 years back in the past, when Marga Klompe, the first female appointed to the Common Assembly, which is a predecessor of the European Parliament, famously said, "Europe has an enormous task to accomplish in the world and has to ensure that it continues to be a powerful and effective partner in Atlantic cooperation. More than ever, the political situation means that we must be firm, realistic, and idealistic." And I couldn't agree more with what she said 71 years ago, ever since the Ukrainian colleagues suffered on behalf of the Russian aggression. During this morning, we witnessed how pivotal that moment was for the change in the enlargement mindset within the Brussels. Somehow in the past, we were two boats missing in the fog. Either there was an enthusiasm on behalf of the Western Balkan countries for the accession to the EU, and then the EU was not very much interested in the enlargement. But I strongly believe that ever since the Russian aggression to Ukraine, the momentum is back. I would stop short from saying that there is a political consensus among EU 27 that enlargement must happen soon, but the political recognition of the importance of the historical momentum, I think, exists. Bosnia and Herzegovina becoming a candidate, 3 new candidates, 2 of them are waiting to start the EU accession talks. Obviously, for the first time in the past, I would say 20 years, well, maybe less, we have a clear signs that the EU is starting to prepare itself for the enlargement. The incoming old new head of the European Commission announced that she will be working on preparation of the EU for the incomers in her strategic agenda 24-29. And for the first time, we have a proof that EU is willing to adjust its institutions, its budget, the way it's managed in order to accommodate the newcomers. So in this environment, it is of utmost importance, as the previous panels have, we discussed at the previous panels, to send the right messages from the region. In order to send the right messages, we have 3 panelists who are going to help us to analyze the growth plan as one of these tools that is supposed to bring Western Balkan countries closer to the EU. The growth plan is basically a sort of a blueprint of how to improve regional integration through economic cooperation, and to learn how to behave as a Benelux countries, as a countries which are removing obstacles for the free movement of goods, of people, and obviously through this economic cooperation try to reconcile. But we are going to dive deep and try to discover whether exclusively economic cooperation can lead to the political reconciliation, or is it maybe too ambitious to expect that? Without further ado, I would like to invite Andy Dobrushi, a dear friend, who is Executive Director of the Western Balkans Open Society Foundations, and to ask him, the OSF in the past recognized the importance of removal of the barriers to the trade, and obviously you supported the Open Balkans initiative in exactly the attempt to create a space for cooperation, those willing to engage in removal of trade barriers. But often this was perceived, even from the expert community and think tank community, as a competition to the project of establishment of a common regional market that was established under the auspice of the Berlin process. So, Andy, where do we stand today with regards to Open Balkans and its complementarity with the common regional market, especially since recent remarks by the new Prime Minister of North Macedonia, who said Open Balkans had its flaws and we need to revisit the role of North Macedonia in this initiative?
Thank you, Serjan, and thank you to everyone who resisted and stayed this afternoon. So we really appreciate it. I mean, I'm really grateful. The question, I'd like to reframe a bit the question. Where we stand today with the Open Balkan, because fortunately the dynamics, or fortunately or unfortunately, you can call it ironically, like the dynamics in the region have moved very, very fast. And have changed a lot. I think at the time when the Open Balkan came on the stage as idea to foster and complement, and I'm emphasizing here the complementary role, there was a very, I think, acute awareness from the people behind it, that this was a complementary process. It was not meant to be a substitute for the EU integration processes or the common regional market, etc. But at the moment that it came, I think it was we should take things into a context first of all. When the Open Balkan happened, there was no growth plan. There was a whole entire disappointments, and we can name it fatigue, disappointment, etc. But I think the rates of trust in the EU process, were very, very low, and there was a dark tunnel in front of us, like the region basically had lost hope that anything substantial would change. So at the time, this was something which came, I think, organically built, from the region. It was never exclusionary, because we can draw lots of conclusion. It was politicized, like there were lots of fears from the other countries, or the countries who were not. You mentioned the willingness, I think at certain points of its life, the Open Balkan basically had, in terms of participation, also people from, the prime ministers and officials also from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also at some point Montenegro. It went strong. It had strong support from 3 countries: Albania, Serbia, and North Macedonia. Obviously, North Macedonia now has had a bit of a change of heart, like in this respect. But that, I think, just demonstrates clearly how important is the political willingness behind these initiatives, And when you put this in comparison with the growth plan, I think it makes it even more self-evident that, how important the political willingness and the inclusion of these processes becomes, and this is where we as OSF are putting also our chips of support, we have been very much looking at the growth plan as a game changer in town. So, and that's why we have put lots of support in it, not because of the financial the region, because we can contemplate and we can discuss a lot, whether 6 billion will save the region or will double its growth, the GDP, in 10 years by 2030, as some of the attractive lines were in the media, but we know that that's not going to happen. I don't think we're going to see a double-digit growth, of the region. But I think the important thing is that this time, because of the also processes like Open Balkan, who were, I think, the right injection and combine this also with what happened after, with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. This, if you take all these pieces together, I think that led to the thinking, or to creative thinking of behind the growth plan. And I think this is important. Now, how do we transfer some of that political willingness into the process also of the growth plan? I think that's very crucial, because it will demonstrate basically that how a customized plan this time from EU can deliver and yield results concretely. I'm not going to dive into the details, because the colleagues in the panel are way more knowledgeable than myself here. But I think in this respect, the emphasis on the single market and how the Open Balkan also behaved, in that respect, I think are very important. We did actually a study, because of course we were aware of the skepticism, surrounding the Open Balkan. We had a study which was done a year ago, basically, when it was finalized, which demonstrated that clearly, if the process would have included all the countries in it, there were countries who did not participate who would benefit a lot, especially in terms of labor exchange and non-removal of barriers. And there were at some point, when you see that also the memorandum of understandings, the plethora of memorandum of understandings were signed, and we've been close to people who work behind, who have now transferred all their energy and willingness towards the growth plan. So I think we have not seen any discrepancy or sorrowness that, why the Open Balkan is on the second stage, like now on the growth plan. I think these are, for as long as these processes drive towards one direction, I think we should be open to consider, because I think the most important element here is how do we identify those processes that create agency, for the countries in the region. And this is what we've been doing also as OSF Western Balkan, as the office now. There was one reason that throughout our pains of transformation, etc., we also regionalized, so we followed a bit also the trends, so now we work and cooperate and support the work in the region as a regional office, basically. So, and we launched now a very interesting platform, Ignita, which also the organizers of this event are part of. And with that, we're trying to boost and create agency for the region, for the organizations, but with one different thing in mind, that this should not only be a secluded effort of the organizations, but it should be in tandem also with the efforts that the governments are taking in this respect, because it's very important to create this constant pressure, on spaces where the knowledge and the expertise that sits in the civil society should serve to energize these processes. I say this because there is lots of running now to catch up, basically. The growth plan is represented as a regional effort, but in itself it has lots of elements that pushes for a competing marathon from the countries itself. So it has some elements of contradictory. We look at it positively, but we should be very acutely aware also of what might be the potential problems of the growth plan, in what is pushing, and how much of the dynamic response comes from the region in this respect. And it's very important that we keep that kind of pressure running, and that's why we're putting lots of efforts and support behind the Ignita, because also in terms of civil society and business sector and other stakeholders, you need to reignite a bit also the process and use this momentum, because we've been hearing about the momentum for a year, basically, year and a half now. So, but I mean, in our bitter history, you know, like the momentums have come and gone, you know. So let's try not to lose this momentum, because I think also our perception from meetings, you know, in Brussels and Berlin, etc., it's increasingly visible, the expectations from that side, you know, and how these expectations are matched with the work and the dedication and the commitment towards this. I think this would be the kind of the measuring yardstick for this. Last comment that I have is very important, because it relates to the exclusion, to the elements of exclusion or inclusion in the process. I know you said that inclusion is very important. But I mean, while the Open Balkan was kind of tainted as an exclusionary club, and people, I mean, it was excluding, it has never excluded anyone. I think the countries who chose willingly to not to participate in that for various political reasons, you know. I'm not going to spend time on that now. But you look now what is happening with the Berlin process, you know. We're hearing from our partners like 6-1, you know. So there is a bit of I would say, like, since it's afternoon, I can allow myself to say this, you know, a bit, you know, hopefully you're not going to remember, but is the sense of, there is a bit of hypocrisy, you know, from the partners, you know. Like, I mean, are we going to make sure that this is a 6 process, or 6-1, you know, like, is going to be on the table, you know, for the Berlin process? Because I don't think that helps the region and to push. And it removes one very important anchor from civil society then, you know, and all the stakeholders. Not only, when I say civil society, I meant it to include a very broad array of actors, you know, not only think tanks and organizations. So I'll stop here, because I think I went a bit too far for the afternoon session, you know.
But if you allow me, just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned the importance of the civil society organizations in the monitoring of the implementation of different reforms, growth plan included. We are facing with a very grave situation in some countries in the region. The one that I'm coming from is especially a poster child, I would say, of a captured state where basically enemies of the open society are in power, and where civil society organizations are under very grave pressure from the government. How is this possible to appease? I mean, we are aware that the growth plan is designed to have a serious conditionality apparatus included as a checks and balance mechanism. But thus far, we fail to see that the conditionality is working, since the countries which are backsliding, especially in the respect of what we discussed this morning, and Marco mentioned that the elementary issues concerning the Copenhagen criteria are frontrunners, while the others who are having regular elections, regular exchange of governments where media is still relatively free, are being kept aside. How do you see the role of the civil society as a you know, a guardian of conditionality in the atmosphere where this is obviously going to be very, very difficult?
I apologize to the colleagues in the panel. You know, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I'll put something in parentheses from a person that I respect very much. You know, when I heard she spoke in Tirana a couple of weeks ago, Natalie Tocci. She said that she put a very interesting framework on the EU integration process. She said that the first wave was about democracy, you know, the issue, Spain, Italy, etc. The second wave, the Nordics, were economy, driven by economy. And the third wave was Central Eastern Europe, was driven by identity. The fourth wave, which includes hopefully us, you know, like in Ukraine and Moldova, it will be driven by security. I think, and I think it's an interesting perspective, but I think it's the right one, looking at the optics from all the angles now. And this in itself, I think, makes it very necessary also for the civil society to look at itself and the mechanism, the instruments that it has available in a more of a different perspective, I think, and in a more pragmatic role. This is what I think. Of course, we're working in a very difficult context, difficult environments, who are very volatile. Very much, they depend on persons that are your interlocutors and on the relationships that you build with them. So it's not. I mean, sometimes in the Balkan, I think, it's not a matter of institutions. It's, we know it's a matter of individuals, like we run this institution. So, pro forma, we have all the right institutions in place, like it's not that. But it has to be, I think, also in terms of civil society, I think this is a challenge that we have. It has to move a bit only from the monitoring role, And that's why I mentioned the fact that, on this platform that we're pushing, it's also a platform which should serve to build a different dynamic relationship with the government, like, so kind of you remove, you need to find the right balance between trenches, but also potential cooperation, because the idea, at least our approach is now that you should use all the openings and all the avenues that you have to break through, and you can break through also by the expertise and pushing then all the levers, pushing the levers with the Commission, pushing the levers with the I think with the progressive side of the society, but pushing also on the technocratic aspect, and as I said, I defined the professional capacities that sit within the civil society, because we know. In our region, human resources, human capital is quite limited. I always refer to civil society and government as a kind of a revolving door. We've seen many friends of ours who have come and go, like from various positions. Usually when they go in the government, they become a bit more intransigent, I would say. But, then later they understand that they behaved like... they understand their role, etc. So I think maybe it's important to put our shoes also in the processes. I said it because I had a very interesting conversation, and I stopped this with the EU ambassador in Tirana a couple of days ago, and he was mentioning like the also kind of a fatigue or a kind of a tiresome approach from the civil society organizations. He said they only come and complain. If we want to ask them what is the solution, what do you offer, etc., and use us for these solutions, you see that things then become like. They become very self-centered and very elitist, And it was an interesting observation. He's been there for 1 year. The thing is that, when we get together in these environments, like this conference, we like to speak with each other, and usually we speak to the converted, because I think we create a bit of a self-perpetuating importance of ourselves. I think we have to take a bit of a more critical role also on ourselves, have a bit of understanding also on the other side. Do not, of course, not at the expense of the principles and what we stand for, but I think in the broader context where we see ourselves as a region with all the security concerns, I think there has to be a bit of a pragmatism in the approach we have, and take the situations one by one. I think this is what I would suggest. I don't know how clear I was, but I stick a bit more on the pragmatism side, especially at this point of time where we are,
Thank you very much, Andy. I think we will have a lot of questions regarding this topic at the end. I would, though, argue with what Natalie said, that each and every of the multi-country enlargement waves was always about security and always about geopolitics. But there was a respect of the value base in that sense as well, which sometimes perhaps is a bit forgotten in our case in this region. Anya, let's step out from the region for a while, and Anya is a regional director for South East Europe at the German Eastern Business Association, and it's good to have someone from the real world present here with the think tankers to tell us how the real world works. And from the perspective of German business community, I'd like to ask you, why is it important to create a regional market and enable this gradual integration into the segments of the EU single market? And I would stress the segments, because it's not accession to the single market, but parts of the single market policy. So what is the perspective from the German business community?
Thank you so much, Serjan, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me and giving the chance also to present kind of a business perspective here, and specifically the German business perspective. And but maybe not everybody knows about the German Eastern Business Association. Let me just shortly introduce what we are, who we are, and also in terms of transparency, which is important to all of us. And so we are the oldest regional initiative of the German business, founded in 1952, so we have a quite long tradition, and for a lot of people mostly perceived more with the focus on Soviet Union and later Russia as one of the main most biggest countries, but we are in charge for 29 countries, and obviously since the full-scale invasion of Russia into the Ukraine, we have 27 partner countries and 2 countries observing, where we just support our businesses to leave the country, that is obvious. And we have different regional directorates. One is in charge for the Ukraine and Southern Caucasus, Central Asia, Central Eastern European countries, so the Visegrad 4 and the Baltic states, and me in charge for Southeastern Europe. That means I'm observing the Western Balkans 6 plus Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Slovenia, just to give you that short picture. And one important thing as well, we are purely financed by our businesses, so the companies and associations supporting our work. This is also just a first statement that, you know, we are closely work together with our federal government, but we are not always have the same position, but in terms of EU integration we have, so that's also an important point. And so back to your question, what is important and why we are also supporting and talking about regional integration. This was already since the very beginning of the Berlin process, and even before that, our main point, if we talk about the neighborhoods and here in the region, about the Western Balkans 6, it's important just purely if you see the market size of each country to use the full potential for each country is really to work together and to create a bigger market for the companies here in the region, and to support each other, also to enable companies to work with the European single market. And therefore we were, as I mentioned, from the very beginning supporting also this, what we call now the Berlin process, which actually started in 2014, was one of the first conferences and was just planned as a series of conferences. I think this is also something we have to mention here. Once we have the 10th anniversary of the Berlin process, it was never meant to be a process, but it somehow developed to be a process. And I think that is also a question we should discuss or can discuss later on, how this process can somehow institutionalize a bit more to bring together all the interest groups we have now somehow involved in this process, to get a more maybe structured dialogue also between all the stakeholders. But this also leads me back to your question, actually, I'm sorry. But again, this is something, the cooperation among the countries of the region, or the economies of the region, is something where we see a bigger potential also for investments of companies, not just German companies, but all companies here in the region, when it comes to harmonizing legislation between the countries, and also tackling all the issues we have when it comes to labor shortage. When we discuss further investments here in the region, we have to tackle this point. And we talk about brain drain and migration from the region. We as a German Eastern Business Association always try to talk about how to reverse this process of brain drain, how to really support a brain gain to the region, back to the region, because in the meantime we have a lot of investments. We have a lot of investments of companies who have positions with really high qualified workforce. Sometimes we have the feeling that these potentials is not really, this potential for getting those kind of jobs is not really visible to the younger generation, who much more looks to the European markets. And of course, I have to acknowledge Germany is one of the markets seeking for a qualified workforce as well. But again, my point is we represent the interest of German businesses who have invested here in the region and who are interested in investing here. So therefore, of course, our interest is to find a dialogue with the civil society as well, of course, the politics, how to create a climate where the people would like to stay. And there we are again we have to talk about the next topics. What kind of living conditions do we have here? And that's the same of how to create a climate where companies are really willing and would love to invest in the region. And the second part of your question you not mentioned yet was also what does it mean, or what does the rule of law, for instance, mean for German companies if they take the decision to invest or not? And I would really underline here and use the opportunity, this is one of the essentials. If we talk about further investments, and I think this is not just important to German companies, but to all companies who try to take a decision on further investments or starting investing, this is one point highly ranked on the list. The rule of law, legal certainty, and it's not just about having the right legacy in place, but also having the institutions following up. So we just tackled the point of oversight. So this is something which is really important. And I would say since the full-scale invasion of Russia into the Ukraine, another point, and there we are also tackling that point of security, is getting much more important. It's a question of security, the security of the investment. So again, also the political developments are much more closer taking into account when it comes to a decision about enlarging an investment or discussing a new investment in the region. So maybe I'll leave it with that.
Thank you very much, Anya, and thank you for making my job easier, getting to the follow-up question immediately in your intervention. Let's move to Stefan Ristovski. Stefan is a researcher in the European Policy Institute from Skopje, from North Macedonia, one of the leading think tank organizations in that country. Stefan, there is a lot of hype, obviously, surrounding the growth plan and the reform and growth facility, the financial part dedicated to fight this convergence gap between the EU and the Western Balkan country. And the whole thing has been described as something new and fresh that could speed up the EU accession process. But is there too many expectations with regards to the growth plan and its effective potential? And they said that in some of the lines promoting the growth plan, there was, I think, 2034 listed as a year where economies could double. Is it a bit overhyped?
Thank you, Sergeant, for the questions. Thanks for the organizers for the invitation and putting this topic on the conference agenda. I think that the hype was real last year this time when the Commission President has announced the plan. Now that we have the communication for the growth plan, the reform and growth facility adopted, we can have a bit more realistic review on what this plan is about to bring for the region. It is promoted as a 4-pillar plan, and I think that I've previously said that these 4 pillars are actually 2 building blocks. The first block is the market integration block that has been promoted by the growth plan, and it's 2 arms, the regional ones and the integration to the single market. The regional perspective certainly has brought benefits for the region. The signing and implementation of CEFTA has contributed to increased trade, to economic growth for the region, and it can be further exploited the old or the same problems persist that we have witnessed from the adoption of MAP REA to now the Common Regional Market 2, the size and the structure of the economies being questioned and discussed to what extent they can really bring significant economic growth for the region. Because we are driven by the economic growth has been driven by and exports have been driven by foreign direct investments. The restructuring of the economies has taken place, but not to the extent where we can significantly increase the trade between ourselves. Probably a more important problem that we are facing now is the political commitment to this project. Not only in the last 2 to 3 months that we have seen significant backstep with the Kosovo and Serbia relations and the signals that we get on how this process will move forward, but also on how much we have implemented all the commitments that we have given ourselves before. Citing the 4 mobility agreements, which we need more than 3 years to still be in the technical working groups before their implementation. The second aspect is the integration to the single market. As you said, this is not really full integration to the single market. The plan cites 7 concrete measures that I think will bring positive benefits for the region. But we have to be realistic. This is not a really innovative approach. Mutual recognition agreements the EU has signed with non-member states before. In SEPA, we have non-EU member states participating. So it's really extending the policy tools that has been in place for the EU for the Western Balkan countries. But I think that this is something that it's a good start that we can work on. 2 things takeaways from this building block is that when the EU is offering, the best way to go forward is to integrate the countries from the region in European agreements or policies rather than forcing out to be first done on regional level then with the EU. I'm here citing SEPA because we'll be part of from that policy, and will not have a possibility to block each other, and certainly citizens will feel the direct benefits. On the other hand, the mutual recognition agreements have been in MAP REA, and we still haven't seen them fully enacted between ourselves. And now to the second part, or the second building block, is the performance-based funding that the EU offers. I think that the hype persists still here because it's new, fresh funds for the region, 2 + 4. In total 6 billion for the region, and not fully novel method. It's pretty much inspired, I think, from the RRF that has been put in place for the member states, and one of the significant differences is the amount that we will receive compared to what the member states got both as grants and loans from that facility. Throughout the day, we have heard how the glass is not even half full, but we should not underestimate the additional funding offered. And I was right, we're not still using what we have, but we have another opportunity to make use of EU funding. Certainly a short-term economic boost will be felt, even though this is a marginal percentage of the GDP for the region. And to what extent this will bring a long-term benefit for the development of our countries pretty much depends on what are the reforms that will be undertaken and what are the infrastructure projects that will be supported in this line. And so here comes the part where we're still puzzled how things will move forward. As Andy has mentioned, the revolving doors between civil society and public administration, we managed to get our hands on what the reform agendas will look like. And we see reforms that can provide some short-term benefits, direct support to the business sector, but a lot of reforms that should have long-term benefit. And it's still questionable and discussed to what extent those reforms will bring, can boost economic growth as they're implemented. But I also want to point out that some of those reforms will be costly for our economies. Restructuring on some of the markets, particularly in energy, infrastructure, transport, can be costly. It requires changes in the state-owned enterprises, which is again politically costly for ourselves. So we also have to take that in account. But at the end of the day, as much as the problem persists on implementing the obligations for adopting EU rules on single market on single market chapters and common regional market, is how much we will deliver on these reforms. The agenda is pretty much packed. It requires a very fast pace on implementation of reforms. And it will depend not only on the commitment, political, but also the capacities to deliver, because there are a lot of institutions involved to implement all the reforms that we have committed to. On the infrastructure projects, unfortunately, I really don't know what projects will be accepted. But again, this is really a good start to build upon. If we show that we can deliver and make use of the available funds, it is a good argument to seek additional funding from the EU for the next MFF. I'll stop here and maybe we'll discuss other aspects later.
Just a short follow-up, Stefan. You mentioned the importance of the capacities. Sometimes discussing the growth plan in the region seems like the growth plan is, in a way, hijacking the capacities for the EU integration process, which is much larger process than just participating in fulfillment of the obligations from the growth plan. And that in majority of our administrations, people who are dealing with the EU integration program are now preoccupied with the growth plan. Thus, they are putting very important reforms in the normal EU accession agenda on the hold. We are also witnessing that throughout the region, and in one country in particular that you are coming from, the government is returning the large amounts of money that was supposed to be used through IPA, not having the capacity to implement it. So do you see there a risk of overburdening the administration and completely refocusing them on something that is much more narrow in the sense of comprehensive nature of the EU accession process and the risk that it brings with that?
When I elaborated on the measures from the reform agendas, from what I know or what has been circulated, I haven't mentioned that I see that those are commitments requested by the EU throughout the country reports, either as a recommendation or a finding in the reports, part of the commitments under the common regional market. So I don't think that implementing these reforms would be beneficial for our process. How much we will be capable to run these processes in parallel and make use of existing structures rather than creating new structures is something that it still really puzzles me for my country, because we are not fully aware how the growth plan structures and the existing was bidded negotiating structures that we still don't have in full, or IPA structures will make use. Certainly it burdens, but it has happened for the member states with the additional funding under the RRF. So it's pretty much my perception that we will have to deal with this offer and make use of what we have. Another aspect is how much the administration has worked on building capacities throughout the years or failed to do so, and now we're really witnessing the very few that are capable of being overburdened with work.
Thank you very much. Let's have another short round of questions before we invite our audience to chip in with their comments and questions. Or if, Marco, would you like to intervene now? You're very flexible.
Hi. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your questions, but this, I guess, is for anyone on the panel. If you could, pardon my ignorance about the economic matters. When the Commission announced the growth plan, they said that it held the potential to double the region's GDP over the course of 10 years, right? And just doing a simple calculation tells you that would require boosting the average growth rate to around 7%. Right now across the region it's around 3%. So we're looking for four more points of GDP growth per year. The money on offer is on the order of much less than 1 percentage point of GDP, right? So maybe you would have some sort of multiplier. I don't know. Maybe this would be sort of one subpart of the question: is the macroeconomic assistance, is it just given to the countries, or is it meant to be, used in some specific ways that are supposed to produce a larger benefit? But even if it is, there's a big gap, right, of maybe 3-4% that has to be accounted for through the other pillars of the growth plan. And the question I have is there any precedent for this? Has any country ever achieved a sustained decade-long boost of roughly 3-4% of its GDP? And if so, how did they do it?
I can take a shot at this. There are other questions, or just, I think Poland is one example, and it goes. Although I'm very skeptical about comparisons, because the contexts, etc., are very different. But in case of Poland, I think Poland, with its entrance at the single European market after it joined, etc., it has kind of it increased by 50%, if I'm not mistaken, in a time span of 10 years. Which was considerable. I mean, it used to stay very much behind, like when it first joined, it was like at the 40% of the European average, and then it jumped like, it was like a kind of quantum leap, like in the space of 10 years. Another country which goes, kind of unattended in terms of focus is also Czech Republic. I went now for the GlobeSec there. It was very interesting. I met with some of the business guys and industrialists. Actually, I didn't know Czech Republic is the biggest investor in the region. Also in terms of the only country which doesn't have much investment, it's Albania. But for the rest of the countries, also in the region, but also on the eastern flank, it's one of the biggest investors. And apparently, Czech Republic has no poverty issues as the last 3 years. I met also a group of young people. It was very interesting, because one of the elephant in the room here is demography. We can talk about growth plan as much as we want, but we see it in terms of capacities. We immediately clash with the lack of capacities everywhere. And this is not only thanks to Germany, who helps us, but also takes some from us. But it's also the issue. I was impressed to see that there is no person thinking of leaving Czech Republic, and these were young people at the age of 28, 30, which shows that, yes, stable economy growth has an important, it's quintessential, but if it's not coupled with stable institutions and a kind of predictability in rule of law, and what we expect, which I mean, for us, these are like wishful, I mean, we yearn for these things, but this should be like the common denominators of a functioning state, you know, and without having this, it would be very difficult to discuss about the growth plan, etc., because I think these are they stay in the back of all the developments of the future, you know. So, I mean, yes, we can achieve it. We might achieve it with this in 10 years, because if there is a great performance now, I'm sure that will increase also the trust in terms of the absorption capacities and in terms of not only absorption but also the management of these funds, which goes to the benefit of the people. Because one of the things which we forget, we discuss growth plan and discuss everything here, but in the end of the day, this has to do with, you know, how much this relates to people in our countries, you know. And one of the things, and I close this because as I was listening, also the question, but also the panel, one of the biggest problems that these plans have is the way to, how are they communicated, you know, and how they are used as a leverage also with, you know, in terms of creating a concrete legitimacy also with people out there, you know. Nobody understands. I mean, I can bet my life, you know, 2/3 of the governments will have no clue what the growth plan means or what are the details, you know, because it's concentrated in few hands, you know. So this is where I see an extremely important role for the civil society, you know, and the organizations alike, you know, because we have the capacity of absorbing huge amounts, masses of information, but we have the incapacity of divulging this information in the right way, you know, in the simplest form, you know, so it becomes tangible, and it becomes also a sort of a word of weapon, you know, for us in terms of the positions that we take, etc., you know, like also when it comes in terms of media communication and everything else, you know. And I think to me this is, and the communication aspect we hear everywhere. I mean, we heard it in Brussels, where we went and met also with the people who deal with the Western Balkans. The biggest problem they have also with themselves, the EU, you know, has the issue of communication, how these are translated in a way that they create pressure and agency also from people, you know, so.
Well, it's very difficult in the countries where media is so controlled and the politicians are obviously the ones who are creating the public opinion, or rather influencing the public opinion to have a proper information. So, Anya, would you like to intervene on this one?
Just shortly, because this question, of course, is absolutely rightly asked, because the first question is what kind of assumption is there was the basis for the idea that we will have a specific growth rate in the region once we use the money, and we had also the economic and investment plan, which actually was the IPA money under the new title. Also including an assumption if we have additional facilities of the European Investment Bank and so on, we will have finally kind of 20 billion euros of further investments in the region. So we are quite, I don't want to comment on this, whether we will really finally see those kind of investments, because these are assumptions we not really comment. When it comes to the growth plan, indeed, for us, it will be interesting what kind of plans the government finally delivered to the Commission and which kind of plans were actually approved by the Commission. But you mentioned one elephant in the room, I would like to mention the other one elephant in the room. It's the growth in the European Union. If we talk about the growth here in the region and the further integration into the European single market, we have to acknowledge that we have a problem within the European Union, and especially also when we take a closer look on the German economic development and growth rates. And if we have to take into consideration that a lot of countries in Southeastern and Eastern Europe and so on are highly connected and depending actually also on growth and the developments in Germany and in the European single market. So again, I'm also would be a bit reluctant in saying, yeah, that's a perfect plan, and in 10 years' time we will see a wonderful growth rate which really brings us closer. But I don't like to be a pessimist, because otherwise I could do not this job. So I try to be a bit optimistic, even though we see not the 7% growth rate per year. I think if we take the growth plan and all the activities as a kind of a political pressure to really deliver on the reforms already actually signed in different contracts and conclusions. So you mentioned that we have the common regional market, we have MAPREA, we have a lot of commitments also regarding the energy community, where the region actually has signed that there will be a reform of the electricity markets, which is, by the way, important also to avoid negative or the most negative effects of the CBAM for companies within the region. So that was a topic we yesterday also discussed at the Business Forum in Berlin. So these are kind of taking really, finally using this pressure to really work and deliver on the reforms already promised would be maybe a kind of a first step into the right direction, and to boost, or at least to support further investments and a further positive development of the economies here in the region.
Thank you very much, Anya. We had two questions, Jelena and Milos.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Serjan, and thanks to all the panelists for these excellent interventions. And obviously, the growth plan has an important potential for the region. But I want to ask Stefan and Anya, above all, each a provocative question. So starting from the one, is economic growth all? The plan itself has been criticized for putting quite a substantive balance on economic reforms and integration in the single market, whereas being a little bit less concrete when it comes to these socioeconomic reforms, which are fundamental to the region's growth and approximation to the European Union. So to Stefan, one question would be, what would be the concrete measures to achieve socioeconomic fundamental reforms in the countries of the region to essentially bring them closer to the European Union? So not necessarily those that are related to energy infrastructure, but those reforms that are essentially required in the domains of the rule of law, etc., etc. And how can we measure their success? So that's one question. And to Anya, we know also that economic growth in autocratic societies is possible, right? So how do you see the role of, let's say, German businesses in ensuring that countries in this region respect exactly what you've said is needed for doing good business, for the rule of law, legal certainty? Because in some contexts, these issues have been overlooked for the sake of, let's say, company growth and investment. So what could, let's say, German businesses bring to this region, and in what ways? Thank you.
I suggest we pick up the remaining questions, Milos and then Anna and then Maya, and we'll stop here for this batch.
Is it working now? Yeah. Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Milos Pavkovic from European Policy Center, Belgrade. I have also two questions, one for Stefan and one for Anya. The growth plan for the Western Balkans has an underlying principle of regional cooperation and regional integration in the Western Balkans. Having in mind that increased tensions between Serbia and Kosovo are ongoing, and also having in mind the recent statement by the Special Representative of Germany to the Western Balkans, Manuel Sarrazin, who warned that Kosovo might be isolated and remain isolated because of these tensions and escalations. How do you see regional cooperation in the future, and especially how do you see the growth plan implemented in the case of Kosovo, if there is no regional, if Kosovo remains isolated? And for Anya, how do you think that this potential isolation of Kosovo could affect German businesses and German investment in Kosovo directly? Thank you.
Okay, shall I go? I have one question for Andy, because he talked more about regional cooperation and regional integration. If we take a look at the experience until now with all the initiatives going on, the Open Balkans, the CRM, and those before them, we can see that the pace or the countries have been moving at the pace of the slowest country, which essentially is the pace of a snail, really not very, very fast. And there is always someone dragging the feet, either for bilateral issues, Kosovo, Serbia, lack of political will, you name it. So how can we basically accelerate regional integration and regional cooperation and still leave no one behind? And I'm sure Danny will appreciate that. What can civil society do in order to achieve that? And the second question goes to Stefan, because he presented the growth plan and the reform agenda. So basically the link between the two, there is a link that is supposed to be conditionality. It's not that we didn't have conditionality until now, but always for different reasons, the Commission was reluctant to somehow use these mechanisms. So would you say that now there will be conditionality, the way civil society would like to see conditionality in place? So basically conditionality that does have teeth to bite and does have an impact. Thank you.
Finally, Maya, first row.
So thank you, Maya Stojanovic, Civic Initiative Serbia. So basically just to add, it was implied, but to add, to verbalize it, there is, I would say, one big elephant also in the room, third big elephant by now, which is democracy. And maybe I'm coming from the civil society sector and from dealing with the past, from human rights, independent institutions, this kind of stuff. So maybe in my eyes, I can see that there are other elephants can be bigger, but this is the democratic one, which actually shows the stability, the rule of law, or the importance of institutions in the region is the most important. I'm also not, I'm not really sure should I say this, but I will say it. So basically we saw the reform agenda for Serbia as a part of civil society, which is also pretty problematic. I was given opportunity to comment on it. So basically we are not happy with this agenda for reform agenda for Serbia. Basically half of the things which are there are already done by the government previously, so they just put it there to tick the boxes and say we will do it by the end of this year. Some of them are really not systematic. So basically there are strategies that should be made, there are some bodies that should be made, so nothing really that will provoke any kind of reform in Serbia. So I can say now, if we have all the measures from this plan in Serbia implemented, we will still have a status quo if we are talking about the reform, democracy and the human rights. So basically my question is, why do you think that European Union is still showing to the region that the citizens should join, we all should join European Union, because European Union is a piggy bank? Like we spend as a civil society 20 years to explain to the citizens we are not going to European Union because of the money. We are going because of the values, we are going because of the standards and everything else. Like we are going because of democracy. And each time when European Union tries to help, they offer money. So basically, I can completely understand this lower amount of people, lower number of people who are pro-European Union, because I'm also seeing with the civil society very smaller and smaller support to the will to enter European Union. European Union, which is acting like this, European Union that have Hungary, European Union that have different kind of processes. We have election in Austria now. 35% citizens are for right-wing party, like the radical right-wing party. So basically we have a very big crisis of democracy in the European Union. It also has to be resolved, as you mentioned, the growth plan or the growth within the European Union, before we can all together talk about how we will have sustainable democracy and sustainable growth, I would say as a consequence of the democratic changes and real stability of institutions. Sorry, I had to say it.
Thank you very much, Maya. We have plenty of questions. Please feel free to start Anya, why don't you take the floor first?
Maybe I start because yeah, there were a lot of questions, and yes, you mentioned. So I start with your intervention. I would say it that way. So I'm not the European Commission. I'm not the bank offering the money. So, and for sure, yes, indeed. So we are not naive, of course. So as yeah, representing the German businesses. So it's not the money, of course, bringing the political reforms, but sometimes maybe it's a helpful instrument to support, to get the political reforms. And if we talk about the reforms needed, it was always also the question from the region, and to be honest, to implement the green agenda, so to take all the measures needed for the reforming. Of course, there's money needed, and there's much more money needed than these 6 billion. 4 plus 2, you mentioned that. So that would be, huh? Okay, but yeah, or the other way around. So just what is the fund and what is direct? What are the credit lines? Indeed, democracy. So of course, and it's somehow also connected to your question, Jelena. So I cannot speak for every company. But what I can say is, from my perspective, the real rule of law is not possible without having democratic institutions, because what I mentioned, you need an oversight, you need somebody who controls that everything is according to the laws and regulations you have decided for in the parliament, and you have to ask the administration to implement. You need somebody to do so. And there are civil society organizations who should do this, but beside that, actually, you need another part of the administration really doing so to do the oversight. That would be my perspective, and I can say that we yesterday also tackled this point. And maybe also to add this, from my perspective, if we talk, and this is again also connected to the question of why people are leaving the region. Okay, maybe Europe is right now a good destination because we still offer good jobs. Maybe the political climate is changing, and we have also elections in Germany, a lot of them, and not always with the results I would like to see. So just to be honest, and yes, we see also in Europe a problem of how people perceive democratic institutions and whether they support really their living standards or not. So this is a question we really all have to put on the table, for sure. And we have also huge discussions, not discussions, but a huge number of companies who were really outspoken about the political developments in Germany, just to state this as well, and they stated also that democracy is one of the fundamentals they need for a good, proper working conditions for their companies. And so coming back to the question of brain drain, brain gain, and how to reverse the moment, actually, I think there was a study also from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation conducted several years ago about the use in the region in 10 countries, and why people are leaving. And one of these questions was, results was, it is also about taking part in the political processes. So you see that there is also kind of a feeling, even though I can earn money here, the next question is, I have a family, I would like to see my children grown up in a good educational system, social security, and of course also political participation, to be part of it. So I think there is also somehow a sign that everybody would like to be part of this, and so democracy is fundamental. Again, from my perspective, it is fundamental also to implement the rule of law. What we do, the positive aspects as a German businesses, and this is what I can say, we have over 20 years, we are now partner or implementing actually a program, the Orange Internship Program for the Western Balkans, to give young graduates the opportunity to get an internship in a German company, 3 up to 6 months. And the idea behind is, and this program is dedicated to the Western Balkans 6 plus Croatia because of the history of the program. And the idea behind is, of course, to get an experience in how to work in a German company and to bring this knowledge back to the home countries and to use it wherever it is possible in the administration or, of course, in companies. That would be the win-win situation. We were talking about this as well. And this is what we do, and where we also support the alumni network, where we have about 1,000 alumni of the program all over the region who meet on a regular basis in conferences, seminars, tackling also the topics of further education, because this is something very important, of course. It's a long life learning and everything what is needed to really, and also everything what is possible where people are engaged together from different countries and economies, and where they travel within the region. And that was mentioned as well. This is one of the main potentials not actually tapped yet, the trade among the regions. So we have the study of German economic team about the 10 years of Berlin process and what has developed. And indeed, there is an increase of exports from the region to Europe, to the European single market, but not so. We have not that dynamic increase, let me put it that way, of trade between the countries in the region. And I think there's a lot of things to do. And yeah, this is something where we at least try when it comes to young people, and not even so young people, because over 20 years of the program means we have people with more than 20 years of work experience. So they are already as young as we are here at the panel. So, yeah, that was, I hope. I think it was about the isolation in Kosovo and how it is affecting the so first of all, let me put it that way. We are really looking forward to the Western Balkan Summit, mid of October, and let's see the results. And what we are doing is we will have next week a big German Kosovar business forum here in Pristina, and where a lot of companies will also arrive and take a closer look to Kosovo. And I think sometimes politics is important, but business to business brings results as well. Let me put it that way.
Thank you very much, Anya. Stefan, why don't you take the floor next?
Okay, I'll start off with what we should focus on. I think that firstly, we really have to acknowledge that the main factors for growth where we lack is something that the growth plan is trying to cover on all indicators on infrastructure, human capital. We really stand behind with the EU averages, and if we want to have economic growth, we really have to work on that because that would facilitate the economic activity. But certainly there are other aspects that we also have to focus on. I think rule of law that Jelena mentioned is horizontal issue that we have to tackle, because many of the problems that persist when we are talking about building infrastructure, improving human capital, are somewhat related with the lack of rule of law in our region. Be that unfulfilled infrastructure projects or misused funds, to implementing a proper reform to the educational system, labor markets, etc. And I think that the growth plan is trying to tackle this, and I think that at the end of the day, it's our own responsibility to work on this. This is something that we heard from Valeska, and whenever we interact with EU counterparts, it is our own. It is for our own good, and Certainly, it requires expertise, it requires funding, but the implementation will rest with us, whether we are discussing rule of law or factors for economic growth and as of functions. Now going to how this growth plan will condition all these reforms with the release of funds. The facility outlines some mechanisms, but a lot of is really unknown because the Court of Auditors has required, the Commission has committed that it will develop a monitoring methodology to which we don't know where we stand. It provides a new transparency mechanism, something called the scoreboard, which we really, again, don't know how it will be implemented. So I think, again, as it is in our case, there is a fruitful ground, and to what extent it will be exploited, it really depends on how the instrument will be fully devised. And again, it goes to other factors that we also have to take into account. Geopolitics has and will probably again influence decisions regarding the growth plan. We see it now with the common regional market. We see with decisions or anticipated decisions of opening new clusters for Serbia that has been circulated as an information. Again, I'm not very certain to what extent the institutions will stand to their word, but again, civil society is here to make pressure on both sides. On the side of our governments and institutions to implement those reforms for our own sake and try to make them work on long term, not really just to fulfill short-term targets that are set in the reform agendas, in a sense to make them sustainable. And on the other hand, the European Commission to pressure that not release the funds, but to require this credible implementation of the reforms. And again, it comes to Miller's questions to a point where I think it is important for this summit. I think that the way how things are developing, it's not beneficial for the whole project. We have seen the Open Balkans been criticized for a format of 3 minus 3. Now we see a new format being promoted 5 minus 1, which again I think it goes in the same line, and it sets a precedent to the whole project that countries can opt out from initiatives that they don't find beneficial. And when we are committing ourselves to a single market or common market, the previous phase in which the EU has been committed, we're discussing this at the transport community, we have to look what the EU did. EU was thinking that maybe qualified majority voting is the only way forward if we want to make member states agree that new regulations have to be put in place. It's far-fetched, probably hard to be achieved, but finding a solution on the voting within CEFTA or moving forward with standalone projects like the mobility agreements have to be seen in other ways rather than excluding the countries one by one.
Thank you, Stefan. And Andy, for conclusion of this round.
I guess it falls upon me to close it on an optimistic note, like otherwise what's the purpose of being in the panels, how do we accelerate, like I was looking at the tapestry here, and it's like trying to find the beginning and the end of the thread here in the tapestry of this conference room, I think it's a dilemma which we face it all the time, like this question that we have for ourselves. I mean, we had it last year when we did when we hosted the civil society event under the auspices of the Berlin process, and we were contemplating with each other, because fortunately in our case we're rooted in this region, you know. We don't have return tickets, so we're here together, suffering or enjoying together, you know. So what we're trying to do is basically something that leaves a mark behind, you know. And one of the marks, I mean, in terms of also in the context of acceleration, was like basically how to make sure that the agency that we try to establish with the civil society, with the organizations, with all the actors, you know, it's something which remains, you know, and it's not a topic of mundane discussions from one conference to another or from one major event to another. So that's why we came up with Ignita, and it's a name which I like very much, you know, like in terms of a platform, because the idea was to propel this discussion from our parts, from ourselves, you know, from within the conversations that we have all the time ourselves, to propel it to other forums, to Brussels, to capitals that matter in the discussion, and I think all the capitals matter in the discussion, you know, because it is interesting if you reflect, because we see the growth plan as a potential accelerator, you know, we don't see it as a name per se, you know, that this is going to solve, this is the panacea of all the problems, you know, like in the region, you know. It's one way, it's one tool, in one instrument which is given to us, so let's use it in as much as we can, because being a pessimistic, it's very easy, you know, like, and I mean, we hear lots of metaphors on pessimism, on optimism, on depression, you know, moving from repressive to depressive, you know, like, and all these things. So I think going back to repressive is sometimes, you know, like from depressive, so it's easy. But I think it's very important to keep the positive note on things, you know, and this is what we're trying to do also with our initiatives. And I had something else which sounded very nice in my head, but I lost the trail, you know, now. But it looked very positive in my head. But probably we'll share it tonight at the conversations we're going to have also with the wine, so that will inspire a bit of a more liberated thinking, you know, in that respect. But this is what I think in terms of acceleration. I mean, this is where I see the role of the organizations, you know, like us, you know, coming together and putting that kind of pressure. But I think also the expertise. I'm insisting because there is lots of, we can push doors, we can open doors with the expertise that sits within the civil society organization and think tanks, and it's an expertise which is pretty valued, you know, like, last remark I have on human rights, you know, because I come from a human rights background. I've worked for 15 years as a lawyer for Roma rights, you know, like a very marginalized community. So I know that the yardstick, the benchmark was like really the benchmark of human rights, you know, like in that respect. And these are in my mind, are extremely important. We should not forget ever, you know, like, and they should remain the part of the focus of the work, not only in terms of the organization, but also in terms of support for donors. I know that from my own experience being on the other side, you know, it's a very difficult subject to sell in terms of donors, you know, like, and support. But it is something that we have to keep focus, and we have to keep supporting, you know, because it's become like also a yardstick of performance of the government sometimes in all the countries that we see, you know. We know what's going on all over, you know. But to me, as I said, like, I'm going back to the beginning when I said, like, the security context, you know, like the security context remains like the Achilles heel, you know, in all these discussions. And I think we have to be and to adapt ourselves, and our approach is also based on that context, you know, because that's how we make ourselves also more relevant, and not digging our heels, you know, like, since I'm using heels, you know, like in this case, not digging our heels only in one position, you know. But I think also a degree of flexibility has to be shown, to be adapted, you know, like, and especially in terms of pragmatism of using the instruments which we have at hand. I think that's, to me, that's crucial, and this is where also our support will go, and it's a long-term support. We're not going for 1 year or 2 years. We have made it clear to our partner organizations on the ground and everywhere that we are in here to stay for a long time and to stick with you in the support, you know, of these topics and of these issues. So I think it's an opportunity to create a different dynamic also within among ourselves, you know, in this respect. So.
Thank you very much, Andy. For me, it remains only to give a couple of closing remarks. If you allow me, I would focus on three, I think, very important issues. One, as Andy said, growth plan is not panacea that is going to solve all the issues, quite the contrary. Unresolved political issues, bilateral issues in the region might hamper the proper implementation of the growth plan, forcing us to miss yet another opportunity that is laid before us. Second, economy, it's not all about the economy. You remember this famous or infamous slogan by Bill Clinton's chief of campaign saying, "It's the economy, stupid." It's not only about economy, it's about the politics as well. Economic and social convergence without the political cohesion within the region, under political cohesion implying reconciliation, discussion, resolution of the bilateral disputes, economic conversion is less probable, if I may say, because it's going to be very difficult, for example, for Kosovo and Serbia to cooperate if Kosovo or Serbian investors are going to feel jeopardized and their economic interests jeopardized in different countries. So this is the second. Third, importance of inclusion. It is important that everybody is on the board, that nobody is left behind. Going back to the previous point, without the political cohesion within the region, it is going to be very difficult. Inclusiveness also is related to the participation of the civil society organizations as watchdogs of the ongoing reforms, bearing in mind that these are, in some countries, the only remaining guardians of the common good in general. The only ones who do not have a political agenda, but rather taking care of the common good issues. So, yeah, the civil society obviously will play a considerable role in monitoring the implementation of the growth plan. And finally, the credibility of the growth plan remains, rather relies on the conditionality aspect of the growth plan. If the conditionality dies, the hybrid autocrats would have their own bonanza, as my good friend Sergeant Twitch recently wrote. So without the proper implementation of conditionality principle, without calling a spade, that doesn't have to do anything about being optimist or pessimist, but rather being a realist in assessment of how things are evolving in the region. Yeah, without that perspective, we will be on the wrong path. So let me finish with these moderately optimistic overview of how important growth plan is going to be for the Western Balkans, and I'd like to invite you to join me in sharing the appreciation with our participants for their excellent inputs in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serjan, Andy, Anya, and Stefan. This concludes our day one. And really, I think Open Society Foundations, Western Balkans is everywhere. Andy mentioned Ignita. No, but I think in everything that's happening good, we have in today members of the Balkans Academy dialogue with us. We were in Berlin just last week with Ignita to talk about digital integration, and tomorrow we'll have 2 panels on this aspect, cybersecurity and disinformation. So just to really thank you for the leadership in bringing the region together. I think support from you has been crucial in this aspect. Now, on technical note, for those of us who are staying at the hotel, there is dinner at 6:30. Please make sure you talk to Chandresa if you haven't talked yet about this. And we have the night owl session at 8. If you haven't received, it's invitations only. If you haven't received an invite yet, talk to Jovan and you want to be at this session, okay? It will be informal, wine served. We freed the wine informal setting around the circle where we will focus on Kosovo-Serbia scenarios, okay? So it will be a more friendly conversation. We'll have Roland Hill from U.S. Embassy and Chris Ramet, the two behind-the-scene people on the dialogue from these two key actors that are involved, and hopefully will be a good conversation, and we hope to see you there as well. And I want to thank you for staying with us until now. Really, we are very